Hello. Welcome to a new video. It's been what, 7-8 months? In YouTube months, that's like 20 years? That's insane. I have been so busy though. I've been at work, I've been working on my studies. Some of you know that I have a master's thesis which I'm working on. That's been going pretty well actually. Just the other day I reached a critical turning point. My topic for today is a look at two countries, Finland and the UK. Now these countries have quite a lot in common with each other. They're both socio-economically developed countries in Northern Europe. They're known for their great weather, their great food, and their amazing track record in the Eurovision Song Contest. But wait, that's not all. Another thing these countries have in common is me, because I am half British, half Finnish, and I have lived, worked and studied in both countries. So over the years I think I've got quite a good idea on how these countries are similar and how they are different. And today I'm going to look at how are they different. But Daniel, why should this interest me? Well, maybe you are Finnish and thinking of moving to the UK, or maybe you are British and thinking of moving to Finland, or maybe you are married or dating a Finn or a Brit and you're wondering how did they turn out the way they did. Or maybe it's just 4 in the morning and you've ended up on that weird end of YouTube again. In which case, shut up! Now, the first thing I've noticed which is quite different between these two countries, at least when you're looking at like the older generations, is the way people spend money. In Finland, people tend to, when they have extra money, they tend to save it and they tend to make long-term investments, like they do renovations on their house or they get a summer cabin. In the UK, I think people spend a lot more like day to day. So when they have extra money, they go out to restaurants, they go out to nightclubs, to the theatre, they go shopping. This is probably changing even the younger generations in Finland, but I think it's still, there is a big difference there. This fools so many foreigners, including Finns. But in the UK, people will always ask you, oh, how are you? How are you doing? And people think like, oh, you know, they're so caring. They care so much about me. But literally, this is just a way of being polite. People really, really don't care. You always have to say, oh, I'm fine, I'm great, whatever. People really don't care. They don't want to hear about your problems. In Finland, on the other hand, people rarely ask you, like, how are you doing? But when they do ask you, they mean it genuinely. They do actually want to know. Both countries have their own culture of good manners. And in the UK, it is so important that you remember your pleases and your thank yous. It's very, very important that you actually use specific words. Otherwise, it's considered really, really rude. In Finland, on the other hand, it is less about what you're actually saying. It is more about your tone and your body language and the context. So there is definitely a culture of politeness there, but it's a lot more informal than it is in Britain. The Finnish language doesn't have a word for please. Now, when it comes to school, specifically like sixth form college level education, there is quite a big difference between these two countries. In the UK, you'll typically drop most of your subjects and at that point you will focus on like 3 main topics which you'll do your A-levels in to graduate. And that results in you having a very in-depth knowledge in those 3 subjects. But you can often have really major gaps in your general knowledge because you've dropped so many other subjects so early. So for example, 10 years ago when I was doing my bachelor's degree, I was literally asked by like fellow British students whether the Prime Minister at the time was Gordon Ramsay. I'm not kidding. And also when they knew that I'd lived in Finland, if reindeers were actually real or if they were made up like Santa Claus. In Finland, on the other hand, you will maybe take more modules in a few subjects, which means you sort of have a slight focus in maybe 3 or 4, 5 topics, but you will maintain modules in other subjects as well. So that means once you graduate, you will have a better general knowledge overall, but you might lack the sort of specialist knowledge in certain other topics, if that makes sense. In the UK, when you're very small, you will start school already when you're 4 or 5. In Finland, you start when you're 7. So that means that Brits start very early, but they do get sort of they're eased into the school system gradually, whereas in Finland you start older, when you're slightly more mature, but then you are straight into the proper school system. It's not like, play school anymore, it is actually proper school. Now, Britain's known as being, a very fashion-forward country, and, London is a fashion capital, obviously. But the reality is that when you've got 60 million people crammed into a very, very small space, people don't really pay attention to each other the same way. So literally, people could walk down the street with a bucket on their head and no one is going to notice. Finland, on the other hand, with only 5 million people, and people have a lot of personal space, people, I think, are a lot more conscious about, other people, and I think people are also a lot more wary about what do other people think of them than they do in the UK. Finland is a coffee drinking country, and Britain is a tea drinking country. Now, this means in practice that when you visit someone's home, they will automatically receive a cup of coffee in Finland or a cup of tea in the UK, whether you want it or not. In my experience, Finns are generally tidier than Brits are. It might be that because Finland has less people, there's more space, and maybe just there's a culture of people being more house proud in Finland, they spend more time at home, but generally homes are tidier, gardens are tidier. In Britain, it's not uncommon in some parts of town to see, sofas abandoned outside in the rain. In a crisis, Brits will turn to tea. In a crisis, Finns will turn to alcohol. In Finland, people have their main warm meal at lunchtime in the daytime. In Britain, people have their main warm meal typically in the evening. Now, when it comes to work life, Finland is definitely more informal than the UK. In the UK, it's very important, even if you have a sort of a more menial job in an office, that you have to wear, a smart shirt, smart trousers, smart shoes. In Finland, there are certain jobs that require, a uniform, and if you're in higher management, obviously you need to wear a suit, but most jobs it's fine to wear your own clothes, and it is generally more relaxed, in the office. There's less of a hierarchy there. Finns swear so much more than people in the UK do. I'm not saying that people in the UK don't swear, but it's definitely frowned upon a lot more there than it is in Finland. And I know that the non-Finnish speakers out there are now dying to know what the most common Finnish swear words are, so here they are. In the UK, your social life and your work life are very, very closely related to each other. So that means that often some of your best friends will be your colleagues who you work with. And there's this whole culture of going out after work on a Friday to the pub for drinks or, doing other social activities together. In Finland, this is kept separate most of the time. Obviously you will have friends at work, but generally after 5 o'clock when it's time to go home, you will go home and you will spend time with your own friends. In Finland, even in smaller towns, the nightlife is very, very much focused on the weekends. So Friday night, Saturday night, that's when, things are lively, people go out. Yeah, in Britain, on the other hand, it is really much, every day of the week, so Monday night, Friday night, Sunday night, whatever, you will see people going out, the pubs will be open, nightclubs will be open. Finland is definitely a lot more relaxed when it comes to nudity than the UK is. This probably comes from the whole sauna culture where, people go to the sauna, obviously naked in, proper Finnish sauna from a very young age. So it's, generally it's quite relaxed. There are definitely situations where it's not appropriate, but generally the attitude is quite relaxed. In the UK, on the other hand, attitudes are still quite old-fashioned with regard to that. So public nudity, in any situation is pretty much a no-no. So I hoped you found this video useful and interesting. I didn't mean to offend anyone in this video. Obviously, I am very, very proud to be Finnish and British at the same time. I love these countries. I just like to poke fun at them sometimes. If you like this video, leave a like. There are still a lot of other differences I could have included in this video, but I might make a part 2 at some point. But anyway, take care, and I will see you soon in another video.